What's good, YouTube? It's Remember, going back in this video. I wanted to do a quick ban list prediction video. Yes, not actually cards that I as a player want to be banned, but rather cards that I think are most likely for Konami to actually hit on the ban list, and the most likely things that I think will happen. So without further ado, let's dive in. Again, these are not my personal opinions, but rather what I think Konami would be crazy enough to do. And if you guys have been following the ban list over the past couple of years, or since Yugioh's conception, there have been some pretty crazy, outlandish ones. So starting off with the banned cards, first and foremost, I think this one is no surprise, but Albion the Sanctifier Dragon. This is a very, very busted card that I think Konami will actually be crazy enough to ban for the sheer fact that it just combos so well with the existing Gimmick Puppet Nightmare Lock, and you guys know what that means when you do get this bad boy summoned to your side of the field. You just skip your entire turn because you cannot play. Now, obviously, they're not going to go ahead and hit Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, for one, because there's releasing new Gimmick Puppet stuff. If you guys have already seen the FTK that's floating around everywhere on Yugioh, there's no way they're going to hit one of the best cards in the deck, are they? In fact, they'll probably make some new combo that special summons this to your opponent's side of the field. I'm sure of it. But for the meantime, you know, for Albion the Sanctifier Dragon, even if they ban Gimmick Puppet, there's so many other things for them to summon back. For example, cards like Jalgan the Spiritualist, there's Ido the magical dude Majigger Supreme guy who locks your opponent out, and there's Ra's Disciple as well. You know, all these cards that basically lock your opponent from playing, period. And Albion is one of the source of well, the pain that's caused from this entire thing. We previously had branded opening, or branded expulsion rather, and that card was quickly banned. And I think Konami has to realize this card is exactly the same exact thing, just on walking legs. So I think they'll actually hit this card. But, you know, branded obviously didn't need this card to win. Just setting up the full board with Mirror Jade was oftentimes good enough. Next card I think they're actually going to ban is Snake Eyes Flamberg Dragon. This seems a little crazy. I know Snake Eyes are recent, but it makes the most sense because from a business perspective, this is a card that's only played in in the Fire King deck and then two in the Pure deck. But from a gameplay perspective, I think it's one of the most powerful cards in the deck, and then a Snake Eye lineup that allow the deck to do so many things, namely play around Nibiru, because anytime that you get the Snake Eyes Flamberg Dragon onto the field under 5 summons, it means you're safe from Nibiru, because if you get nibbed, you get the nib token, then you get 2 level 1 fire monsters from your graveyard, because you trigger Snake Eyes Flamberg Dragon, which allows them to continue making a board, whether that's like IP Masquerena or Promethean Princess, which can easily be made because there's 3 monsters on board. You know, you just link climb into 2 effect monsters and then make Princess. Basically, this card being gone would make the deck so much weaker because Snake Eye Ash would have nothing to actually go into besides, of course, Snake Eye Oak, which makes it so the deck cannot actually play around Nib as easily. They would have to basically rely heavily on the existing Divine Temple of the Snake Eye in order to even mount somewhat of a board, and even then they only get the 1 body plus Nib token. So I think they'll actually get rid of this card. Again, the Pure deck plays 2, and then Fire Kings plays 1, and this card is not super expensive, so a reprint wouldn't really bring a lot of sales or demand from a business perspective. And I think gameplay-wise, this card is obviously one of the most busted cards in the Snake Eye engine, and I'd rather them hit this than original Sinful Spoils, because at least then we can still play supplementary engines like the Fire King stuff, but also stuff that's more rogue-ish, that's getting more support in the Terminal world. For example, Infernoids. Decatron is actually a level 1 fire monster that can be summoned off of original, and it would just be really sad to see them hit the entire engine and make Infernoids not be, you know, as powerful after getting new support. And I just think that Konami probably already foresaw this, so they're probably just going to hit the actual bigger problem instead. That's about it for the banned cards. Believe it or not, I only think there's going to be 2 banned cards. Personally, maybe they'd be crazy enough to hit something like Harpy's Featherstorm, but from what we've seen so far, they're not inclined to touch cards like that, so I think they'll probably just leave it as is. Now moving on to the actual limited cards, I think at the top of my list is actually Snake Eye Ash. Yep, I'm actually going to go on a whim and say Konami's going to do the thing where they actually hit the consistency of the existing Snake Eyes deck. Beyond Flamberg Dragon, I think the deck would still be really, really powerful. Obviously, Poplar into Original is just so broken still. So I think they'll actually hit Snake Eye Ash to 1, and it hurts the consistency of the deck enough. Now, originally, I thought they would probably hit Wanted, as you guys probably saw in the thumbnail, but now I'm thinking, you know, Wanted is like a $70 card, $50 to $70, it always fluctuates, and from a business standpoint, Konami is definitely going to make a reprint set that milks the sales of Wanted before limiting a card like this. Traditionally, in the past, they've always had sort of a business sense that accompanies the actual gameplay of R&D. So they're kind of, I think the Konami higher ups are like, hey, R&D team, you guys have to basically make sure that you do not ban any cards that are worth money, because we want to sell some product. We want to take advantage of this to sell some more future reprint products, and players will be flocking to buy it. And if you limit Wanted, then that means no one's going to really buy the product, because all they need is one copy of Wanted instead of 3. So personally, I think Wanted is still going to remain at 3 for that sole purpose, and that's another reason why I think they're going to ban Flamber Dragon, to actually hit the deck enough where it actually is a lot weaker than it currently is, but still has a lot of firepower. And we're just going to hit some consistency cards like Snake Eyes Ash. Personally, I think this is a card that's going to get limited. It's the most powerful starter. It kind of puts them so they have a lot less starters, two less copies, and they have to see Bonfire to see Snake Eye Ash. And now without Lambert Dragon, you can't really play into Nib as well. So I think that's personally what I feel like they're going to do. And Snake Eye Ash, obviously being a super rare, is not something they can sell more copies of if they reprint it necessarily. Next, I actually think Summon Limit is going to get the Axe to 1. This is no surprise. This card is everywhere. It's a premier floodgate in the actual format right now, and people have finally realized that Vanity's Emptiness is actually back, and it's called Summon Limit, especially because Summon Limit doesn't really have any drawbacks, especially in the Snake Eye deck, given how you can literally just pass. If your opponent hand traps you and you end on like a Snake Eyes Ash, that's fine, because on your turn you can use something like a Black Witch or an original to just send away the Summon Limit and continue playing and full comboing after stifling your opponent for a turn. Whereas cards like Anti-Spell Fragrance, yes, this should also be hitting the ban list, but I don't think Konami's going to do anything about it, because it's been around for many formats and it just doesn't feel like they want to touch this card. But there is a bit of a silver lining. I mean, obviously this card has slight drawbacks, given that if your opponent stops your combos and you end with like one Snake Eye Ash, you could potentially be locked under your own anti-spell, because your opponent just clears your board with monster effects, leaves the anti-spell up, and you kind of lose on the spot. So obviously some of the players have decided this is a lot better, and currently I'm inclined to agree, at least in this particular format. But that's not to say Anti-Spell Fragment shouldn't get hit, but again, this is what I think Konami is going to do, not what I personally want to happen. So I think they will actually limit Summon Limit, and I hope they do, because this card is very unfun to play against. If you guys have been staring down on the other side of the table, Summon Limit, yeah, it's not a good day. Next, I think this card is actually coming back to 1, and it's been at 1 for nearly 11 years now. Yep, this is none other than Tidal, Dragon Ruler of the Waterfalls, and I did put emphasis on the 11 years for a reason. These guys have not been playable for a long time now because of power creep. Even if they were legal, I do not think they would have made a dent in the metagame. Obviously, Konami has been very, very careful about this. A couple of years ago, they gave us back Tempest, Dragon Ruler of the Storms, and they were holding their breath on that, but yeah, this guy didn't do anything. Then they said a couple of years later, you know what, we're gonna test the waters a little bit and we'll free Blaster, Dragon Ruler of Infernos, and this did absolutely nothing. Then recently on the most recent ban list, they said, you know what, you guys can finally have Redox, Dragon Ruler of the Boulders, which was once considered one of the most broken of the 4 for the sheer fact that he has an broken in hand effect that allows you to basically act as a pseudo monster reborn by discarding himself and another earth monster. So this of course was very, very busted back in the day, but surprise, surprise, it does nothing with the modern day power creep against Snake Eyes, against decks like even Sword Soul. You know, like these guys are not going to compete, especially against hand traps. Like you could think of any rogue deck today that will definitely dust a full power Dragon Ruler deck. Unfortunately, these guys can probably come back to 3, or I should say fortunately, honestly, I don't know, whichever you guys want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! If you like the power creep. But I do think Taito is going to come back. Another reason is because Konami actually teased that we're getting some Atlantean structure deck support after the Fire King structure deck. Yep, the next one's going to be Atlanteans. And these guys are already fighting the Fire Kings on cards like High Tide on Fire Island. So yeah, they're going to finally close out this lore and give us the cards that we desire. And you can see that on Fire King Sky Burn, there's actually an immolation going on of the Abyss Gaios. You can see them right there in the with the trident. So yes, long story short, I think we're actually going to get back Tidal. And you guys have realized that Murmo Abyss Gaios can actually be made with Tidal because it requires 2 level 7 water monsters. Yep, back in the day, Tidal was one of the most busted Dragon Rulers for the sheer fact that it works so well with Mermails, and the fact that he was a level 7 dragon water type meant that you could easily make things like Abyss Megalo and then just overlay instantly. You could also banish him off cards like Goatsark to search for things like Dragon Eyes. Yeah, if you guys remember 10 years ago, I actually played this in a YCS and got first after Swiss on day 2, so that was a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite cards, and I'm just thinking that we'll get this guy back finally. He's not doing anything, like, even if he comes back to 3. So yeah, Konami will probably finally free him. So that's actually all I think is going to be limited. So moving on to the semi-limit, what is Konami going to bring back to 2? This is actually one card that I think they might experiment and bring back to 2, and that's Change of Heart. So Change of Heart is a card that's already at 2 in the OCG, and it doesn't really see much play, surprisingly. The power creep in this game has gotten to the point where Change of Heart, a once banned for nearly 20 years card, or over 20 years actually, was brought back and no one plays it. Now, why do I think Change of Heart is coming back to 2? Well, they're already testing the waters by bringing us back Snatch Steel to 1, which obviously did nothing. This is a worse Change of Heart because it's attached to legs, and if they get rid of the Snatch Steel, then, you know, the Change of Heart doesn't have this issue where the monster goes back to their opponent's control. Obviously, you do not care about controlling it for longer than 1 turn in the modern power creep through Yu-Gi-Oh! And then also another thing that caught my eye on the previous ban list was how we got Mind Control back to 3. So Konami's probably like, all right, we're gonna kind of test the waters a bit, see if these steel cards are as broken as they once were. And apparently they're not, especially when we have one of the most strongest steel cards in the entire history of the game, which is Triple Tactics Talent, a non-targeting steel card that also has utility going first and going second for its other molds, right? So I think Change of Heart will definitely come back to 2, and I'm kind of sad that I sold my other MRD First Ed one because I like collecting these cards. So that does it for the semi-limited cards. What about cards coming back to 3? Well, this is my prediction, and I think Konami's actually going to bring back Miscellaneous Swords to 3. They've had a lot of opportunities to do this over the past couple of ban lists because dinosaurs have been seriously outcrapped. Yes, they are getting some new support, but they're just not nearly as powerful as the modern-day power creep. And I think dinosaur players actually deserve something back, and I hope Konami R&D agrees. In fact, I would think that they probably will free this card sooner or later, but it's a matter of when, if anything. Miscellaneous Swords is obviously very, very powerful because it protects all of their monsters during the main phase, but nowadays you don't really care about that as much. There's so many strong board breakers and things that you can leverage that still don't play into Misk, like Ash Blossom of the Misk effect in the graveyard, obviously. We have other cards that can kind of deal with this. We have DD Crow. You know, people are getting clever, and there's so many ways to actually stop the Miscellaneous Swords that I just don't think it's going to be that good if it came back to 3. So I would expect Konami to maybe be eyeing the idea of bringing this back to 3, and it might just be this ban list. And that's actually all I had for the ban list. Honestly, I want to be really, really safe about it. These are just very, very educated opinions and guesses on the actual prediction that Konami's going to make. What do you guys think Konami's actually going to do? I mean, obviously, if it was up to me, I would ban so many more cards and hit a lot more cards. But personally, this is what I think they're going to do. You'll notice that I didn't even go over D-Shifter on the list because I don't think that they're actually going to hit Shifter. They had so many more opportunities to actually hit Shifter, as well as cards like Pot of Prosperity, and yet they did not at the height of those cards' power. I guess Shifter's pretty strong now, but you know, it was also equally strong back in the day. So I think they're not going to hit those cards. Unfortunately, Konami just seems to think that they're a necessary evil. And yeah, this is just my prediction on what's going to happen, what they're going to do. Guys, let me in the comments what you think Konami's going to do. And if there are any cards we're missing on here, definitely let us know. Other than that, thanks a lot for tuning in. We'll see you guys next one. Bye-bye.